We now move on to our next segment, and that's a panel discussion on business resilience, how data and technology can drive resiliency for Indian businesses. For this discussion, I'd like to call upon stage our eminent panelists, and in no particular order, may I request you please come on stage as I introduce you. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. Ajay Manglunia, Managing Director, JM Financial Products Limited. Please give him a big hand. Mr. Rahul Sharma, Chief Information Officer, Tata Projects. Mr. MVP Padma Kumar is Geo Head of Operations, West Asia Work Dynamics JLL. Mr. Arindam Mukherjee is President, India Business Cloud 4C. And Mr. Manish Barve, Data and Analytics GTM AWS. Please give them a big round of applause. May I request our panelists to please sit in the order of your photograph on the screen. May I request our panelists to please sit in order of your photographs on the screen. I hope that's the order that we are following. Okay. Yeah, lovely. And to moderate that panel discussion, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to invite on stage Mr. Vipul Oberoi. He's Director Marketing, Learning Solutions, done in Bradstreet, India. Welcome, Mr. Oberoi. Yes, over to you, Vipul. Have a good one.
Thank you. Am I audible? Yeah. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Great to have such a great eminent panel here. And our discussions in this value creator, it's centered around 3 pegs. One is on business productivity, second is on resilience, and third is on sustainability. And here we are talking about resilience. And when we are talking about resilience, we are talking about a company surviving the high tides and low tides of time, the cyclical movements which happen in the industry, and also any kind of whiplash that comes from any events which happen in its internal environment or its external one. And that is a very important part of value creation, because there could be superstars in 1 year which may benefit from one significant policy change, or may benefit from the hard work done of 1 year. But how do you identify a company which is really, really strong? And the word strong itself talks about resilience. And here we are talking about resilience in the value creators. We are talking about resilience over past 5 years. And the strongest of companies in our value creators list are actually those who have stood the test of time for a very long period of time, even decades. And we have the eminent panelists here, whose organizations are a true representative of resilient organizations. Now, typically, analysts, businesses focus on a lot of short-term performance metrics, and they really do not give enough significance to a long-term growth. Now, data and technology, therefore, has become very important. Earlier, it used to be a distribution muscle or a financial muscle which held companies in good form. But now it's data and technology which helps even challenger brands come up the curve very quickly. And this is one of the key pegs of this panel discussion about data and technology being a growth enabler. And data has now been seen as not just a byproduct of the operations. Data is now considered as an asset which organizations proactively build, because that gives them intelligence, to understand the market, that gives them intelligence to foresee the troubles which are coming and to tide over the challenges. So here, in fact, I would start the discussion with Arindam, possibly. And Arindam, one of the first things I'll ask you is, how do you really Indian companies can gauge what business resilience is? So what would be an indicator of a resilient organization according to you?
It's working? Okay. Thank you, and great to be on the panel with all of you. So the business resilience and the business risk, I think in the last few years, all of us have seen in the form of an epidemic outbreak. And many of the IT leaders would see that overnight we need to move our offices to remote working model. And it was not easy for that particular set of people to imagine a world which was never envisaged, because there was no end date to that particular continuity planning that you were doing. Came the supply chain disruptions, came the war, came all of those kind of things. And you would see that the resilience of the business plan in which you used to earlier forecast your business, that has gone through the roof. Whether it's a chemical industry or it's a drugs industry, you can see that they have gone through that entire cycle of downturn with China unlocking and China relocking, everything happening at the same time. What we have seen from the information technology industry, from the cloud computing industry that many of us belong to, is that cloud gives you a kind of an operative plane where you basically abstract your entire business resilience away from the geographic boundaries in which you operate. So what it really means is that if you can imagine a world where your risks are not concentrated into a certain way you do things, but distributed across many of the failure points in which you can do that, that was possibly a beckoning of it happens. To give an example, if I'm an IT services employee and I'm servicing a customer in UK, okay, so what happens is that that customer asks me for the login, which is separate and different than his company's login. It didn't matter when you are inside the organization, but the moment you are at your home, the customer is mandating that when you are logging into my data, is a cousin of yours standing behind and looking through that. So how do you do the posture management? So a lot of nuances about the resilience, about the way that you used to look at your intellectual property and assets have gone through a complete upcycle down. And that is where, as we go through the conversation, you will see that we strongly believe that a cloud-based subsystems, my initial comments was just ready. We have been always saying that, but the COVID, post-COVID, it accelerated in many nuances, in many forms, in many places at the same time.
Thanks, Arindam. You mentioned about COVID, and that was 2020. It's been 3 years. But if I talk about JM and Ajay, and JM has just completed 50 years. It's, if I have to use a more grandiose term, half a century by now. And you would have seen many more, your company must have seen many more such kind of challenges in the past 50 years. So how has JM thrived in the past 50 years?
So, they are the decades by decades, and the thing is that there are a lot of things which are predictable, there are a lot of things which are unprecedented, there are a lot of things which are probability and all of that. And the challenges which one gets at every point of time are completely different than it was earlier. So COVID is such a case where it's once in a century kind of an impact. Prior to that, we have seen a lot of other issues like 2008 and a couple of other financial scams and all of those, which could have kind of shattered the confidence of the market, and all of those things which are kind of good enough to destabilize, break the trust, restart the things from the scratch and all of those. Now, if you look at some of the recent challenges like Israel-Hamas conflict, which is a continuous going on war, and it has an impact on the energy prices world over, India being a larger importer. If we kind of are subject to some supply chain disruptions or a war escalating. We import a lot of oil from the Middle East countries and all of that. All of a sudden, a spike in oil prices will not only create a lot of inflation, but it's a problem for our country in the sense of maintaining the fiscal balance and forex flows and all of that. Another challenge which we have seen a couple of years back, and it is still ongoing, which is Ukraine-Russia war. And the thing is that it has a completely different set of challenge, and India being in middle of both of these crises. At one point of time, it was kind of a defense-related issues, and the commodities which we could have got it from the Ukraine, and all of those got disrupted, plus the defense equipments and all of those. So every country for India as such is important, and we need to maintain a fine balance. We can't afford to be on one side of it. And the China being our neighbor, it is kind of a completely different issue and problems. The thing is that China slowed down. A sneeze to China is kind of a fever to the world. And we see that China is still taking a lot of time to stabilize, and it's kind of creating different, and India's trade ties with China are of a different scale. And the fact is that we need to find a solution, we need to be adaptable, we need to get some kind of a alternate to all of those issues, so that you either can plan something ahead, or you kind of be a little more responsive to deal with such situations. So there are different scenario analysis, there are different plannings, there are different scanning of the horizon. There are certain things which probably you can expect, you can plan, you can have an alternate to that, and you probably need a lot of data points, you need a lot of study, you need a lot of planning for kind of to deal with such situations. And these are unpredictable, and these are such things which probably can happen, and it could be kind of a completely different chapter for any country like this. So these political tensions, geopolitical tensions are kind of have linkages with every country, with probably a different scale of problems, and everyone will have to deal with it.
So would you say that geopolitical impacts are more predictable?
These are not predictable, these are not kind of planned, these are kind of such a scenarios which probably can happen, may have different impacts on any of the country. But these are some which you need to get ready for any kind of unplanned events, which can have a lot of impact without you being prepared for it. But some sort of alternate, some sort of via media, some sort of ties you need to build. You can't be completely be dependent on one situation. For that you need a lot of data points, you need a lot of strategies, you need to study a lot of things. You can probably, rather than importing from the Middle East, you can afford to import from other part of the world, which is Russia. So all of those things, since things are going smoothly, we may presume that it was planned. But it was never planned. With a lot of help of data, with a lot of help of technology, you could have probably made an alternate to such things.
So I understand. So what you are trying to say is that, of course, there is a long-term impact, and there could be concentration of risk in a particular area. And I think, in fact, MVP, if you can throw a light on the geopolitical issues and how businesses can be resilient, because in your line of work, of course, with JLL, it is spread across the world, and you are working with a lot of global organizations. How do they tackle such geopolitical issues?
So, to answer straight, see, resilience, I will start from a bit of, my mechanical engineering background. If you ask what is resilience, it actually is the ability to come back to its original shape when the stress is removed. So from a business point of view, One, you survive. After that, you thrive, or just you can take it up to a next level, evolve as altogether a different species. I'll park that resilience part on one side and then come to every business has got 6 dimensions of resilience. One, it is the business model itself. The second one is your reputation, the reputation of your business. The moment you set global business, automatically all the brand names which you see here, they have a reputation. It actually adds to resilience. The next comes the organization structure itself. I'm sure the panel discussion prior and the start, that corporate governance part would have touched upon it more. Then comes the next 3, which is a common thread across all the businesses. That is operations, technology, and finance. So all global operation, and this is right on top of every CEO's mind. That is the geopolitical tension hampering your operations. You don't know which part of the world, but if you're operating like JLL in 80 countries, at any point of time, there is at least one crisis brewing in one part of the world. In the last, let's say, just 3 years, it was Russia-Ukraine war. JLL had to terminate operations in Russia. That is one. So it's a resilience part is that where do you shift that business to? More than where you shift the business to, what do you do with your employees there? So that is one part of it. The second one, Sri Lankan crisis. It's more related to finance. The currency got devalued so much. And now what do? How do you, you can maybe hedge against it, you can pay them in dollars, but if you actually run out of milk in that country, how are you resilient? Because your employees still have to go to the office, they have to have a full stomach to work. And the last part is common thread, I'm sure any panelist here is going to touch upon, that's technology. You told about AWS and shifting of the entire operations into the cloud. So if any global business is focusing on these 6 dimensions, they will naturally be resilient. And it's more like, what can I say? Everybody is aware of the risk, but not so sure of the solutions. You'll have to play it by the ear at that time. But having a robust setup around these 6 dimensions will definitely, I can assure you, at least from the JLL and its global perspective, will let you survive definitely, let you thrive. How you want to transform, that depends on what is the level of resilience which you have built into these 6 dimensions.
Thanks. So nicely put on these 6-7 pointers which every organization should look at. And you mentioned about something of the common thread of data and technology helping everyone. And Rahul, on Tata projects, it's data and Tata, on Tata projects, of course, and you're looking at something which your operations are also globally. And how do you manage information? How do you manage that data to the best use to build that resilience?
Thank you for inviting, first and foremost. I think my colleagues talked about resilience and the impact, how things like COVID, thereafter Ukraine war, then multiple other areas of things which not only created a sense of urgency in corporations. I think they did it quite well, and quite well they come out. And I think one thing which has also happened is due to that, a lot of transparency has also come in, which is showing in the numbers across the world in our whether it's Nasdaq or Indian Stock Exchange. You see markets growing, things growing, and I think one of the key aspect there is data and technology. For us, it's very, very important because how we balance out a typical thing wherein customers are asking us to reduce cost, suppliers are asking us to increase cost. What can balance it out? I think the only thing which can balance it out is the effective use of data and technology, how we utilize that. For example, just an example to quote, progress measurement. Whatever work we do in Tata projects is all very physical and seen by everybody, literally. How can I measure that using drone, using photogrammetry, using AI and ML, not just manually measuring it, which creates huge amount of data. How do I manage that data? What should I make out? How correct it is? Can I not only get volumes, can I get quantities as well? So the whole dimension of how we operate completely changes. And I think that's one thing which we have learned a lot. That's why I said, from an emergency thought process, should I do, should I not do? Now we start thinking, what if the crisis happens? How we can manage it? I'll go a step further on resilience. Earlier, we always have a thing that, we will have a lot of people in India, everything is available, you can do a lot of construction as an example. Now, it's not only blue collar, white collar, there's a gray collar as well. How do we manage that when people may not like to do a lot of physical work? How do I manage that? And with the kind of speed with which a country like India is building as infrastructure, at the mammoth speed, so how do we do that? And I think data and technology and really speaking are contributing a very large thought process in shifting of the operating models as well. It's not just about looking at resilience as well, it's also shifting the operating model itself. Look at supply chain, for example. Earlier people used to talk about procurement. Now, people talk about supply chain control towers. They want to know everything, what is happening where, how it is happening. So I think there's a lot of shift in how we operate, and with the technology and data coming on the like a first priority, it will bring a huge transparency in the system as well, and people will start looking at companies and organizations very differently from a resilience point of view, not just in compliance standpoint, but even beyond that as well. So that's what I feel about it.
You mentioned about those physical projects which are happening, and now everybody wants that kind of data, that kind of control. What are the particular data points do they look at?
So, for us, it's very important. Not only we would like to measure the construction progress, we actually want to measure the performance of an equipment as an example. So you put a lot of sensors, how it is operating, because what is the uptime it is going to give. So, and these thoughts are, earlier we used to always do first design, then procure, then construct. Now the ask is, how can I operate and maintain a plant? So we started thinking backwards. If I adopt this philosophy, if I am able to do this using data and technology, if I build those sensors and I'm able to reduce my operate and maintain costs, that's how I want to design. I want to devise a philosophy of procurement of equipment where I have multi-year contract, not just for my contractor, but the customer is also expanding its scope regularly. Construction, how can I do work packaging where my footprint at site is very minimum, so that my people are safe, my people are upskilled, and they do very, very different things. So that's why the thought process is completely changing, I would say upside down from a resiliency standpoint. And that's where the data and technology in sectors like construction are in the front right now. There are a lot of construction tech companies which are making so much of noise in the last 3-4 years, really, because that's the need of the hour today. In manufacturing, we may be able to reach somewhere, but construction is still catching up. So even there's so much of activities we are doing, and everywhere we're talking about, not just data, I think AI as well, how that can bring value.
Sure, that's actually a marked change in the construction industry then in that case. And construction is all about physical, and AWS, Manish, is all about digital infrastructure. And what Rahul was mentioning about that people getting that comfort from having data on their side, that gives them that kind of real-time intelligence. And how do you think that has changed? Because people are also moving from on-prem to cloud. They are looking at new technologies like AI to provide them with solutions. Is that a very real trend?
It's on. Am I audible to everyone? Yeah. So firstly, thanks everyone for your time today, and thanks for all the panelists here. I'll just take a step back on some of the points made, obviously, to answer the question as well. From a resiliency standpoint, I guess, and I've been long enough in the industry now, I mean, there were times when I joined, which was Y2K. We then had the 2008 financial crisis, and we have some of the recent events as well. From an AWS standpoint, I guess the way we approach this is typically, rather than risk mitigation, it's always seen as risk anticipation. So that's one of the core philosophies to what we try to do, because one of the points which is made in our onboarding itself is talking about the fact that things will fail all the time. So to be able to have mechanisms in place to respond to our customers, and I think you made the point earlier in terms of being able to recover to the normalcy phase is important. So it's almost ingrained in the AWS philosophy to be able to handle resiliency for our customers. I'll give a very specific example here. From a standpoint of, and I'm sure all of you guys have used Amazon at some point in time, when we did have a situation in 2019 where there were these challenges that we had to face in terms of physical interfacing with each other, contactless delivery was brought in. So something which was brought in from Amazon's standpoint, which was how do you address resilience? Yes, it's one thing to say that we'll anticipate a potential known unknown, but to be able to innovate is something which is key to what I believe is required from handling a resiliency standpoint. To answer your point in terms of whether cloud helps, it absolutely does. From an Indian context today, over the last 6 or 7 years, we have moved from why cloud to a situation where our customers are asking what more in cloud. I think that is definitely the case which is happening. So from our standpoint, the two other aspects which resiliency, I think we talked about financial, operational aspects, the two key things which customers obviously look at us to answer is one thing is around workforce resiliency. To be able to have the upskilling, cross-skilling of a large workforce to handle the newer things that are coming in the market from a technology standpoint. The other thing which the regulator mandates, especially in the financial services and healthcare setup, is the localization from a data resiliency perspective. So from an AWS standpoint, these two manifest themselves as key parts to us.
So localization of data in particular, you mentioned, so companies are insisting on localization of data and the reasons go beyond regulatory?
So I'll answer it in two parts. There are regulatory driven mandates which you have to obviously align with or comply with from a financial services, insurance standpoint, which obviously we work towards. So we obviously have a DR which has come in Hyderabad in different seismic zone, for example. So those are regulatory mandates which apply for any geo. There are ones which are perception driven as well in some cases where people typically, and customers will respect that, who have been working with a lot of homegrown systems which have traditionally been on-prem. So there, sometimes you do have to address the situation of how we can move these as part of a modernization setup. But it works both ways. Customers, as I said today, are open, much more open beyond the regulatory setup to actually consider data moving outside of the Indian geo as well. But right now, I think in the recent 2 years, we have seen almost everything that we do here is localized as far as India is concerned. So whether it's regulatory mandated or whether it's customers wanting it, irrespective of the regulation aspect, we make sure data is localized here.
So better to be localized rather than...
We have invested huge amounts in India today. So I think all of us are gunning for what we can do with more with the Indian data here.
Yeah, sure. Arindam, your thoughts on this?
So I agree with him. I think many of the industry domains, if you really look at it, like the contact center as an industry, if you really look at it, many of the industries are experimenting the local dialect and how much you can make it language sensitive to the remotest part of the country, okay? And then bring the nuances of the algorithm having to self-learn and self-train itself for a better output every time you do that. Because, I have seen somewhere that many of the new age shoppers in the next 5 years possibly would be querying the phone in the voice command and in the local dialect. And that's where many of the hyperscalers are investing quite a few billion bucks in their research in making this fine-tuned. And that is definitely the new frontier. I also feel that, the explosion of the data as a cornerstone to make a decision making, what used to be like, it has happened already, 5-6 years it has happened, nothing new. It has happened, but the nuances about the large parallel language models, which I was in the Gartner event, I was telling the audience in the morning, that they're saying in 1993 was the internet and 2007 was the iPhone, and 2023 is the generative AI, and if you go to Gartner site, the only thing that you search is Magic Quadrant, right? The only most popular. And January 23 onwards, the most searched words is the large language model and all of the associated. So, and very interesting ways that you can infuse parallelism in the data. To give an example, I'm just for the fun of the audience, if I say that Newton is lost in the jungle, okay, every time he eats a good apple, he gets 100 marks, and every time he eats a bad apple, rotten apple, he gets a -10 marks. and he can continue to do this experiment for 100th of the apple. This is AI. Now, if you say that every time he eats a bad apple, he gets a -10, and I let him run this experiment not more than 5 times. And then you say, as he moves to the adjacent jungles and he gets to get green apple, he gets 300 marks. So simultaneously you're infusing data from multiple parallel sources for your language to be trained for Newton's probability to survive in the jungle far better. And you take that example, I was talking in the morning about the gearbox example, right? Someone is working that a new material for the gearbox is being sourced through a generative model. Because the material could be available somewhere else part of the world, and that is massively reducing the innovation cycle. What that automotive company could be doing sitting in India, that is possible today. The healthcare example I was giving, that profiling the doctors and querying a model by which any patient who is looking for the specific thing that you need to look for the doctor possibly is not there in the resume bank, but through querying model you can pull the best of the profiles that. So I think across the industries this is really happening, and I completely concur with what he said.
So would you say that then technology is a double-edged sword?
Can you repeat, sorry?
It's a double-edged sword.
There are guardrails and there are always blind spots, right? So one has to kind of look through those elements, and that's why people are saying that we are at the peak of the hype cycle. And in the peak of the hype cycle, every single industry players would say ki this is the best way to do that. But like Rahul is a practitioner, so people like us will be sitting in front of him and in communicating this is the best. But the trough of the cycle is where the real innovation happens, real adoption happens. In spite of talking so many times, not too much of adoption at this point of time had happened. There are promises around that. I think it's a very interesting time this conference is happening, because we are going through this cycle of finding the truth is what I would like to comment.
Finding the truth, yes, definitely. And for you, because in JLL you manage the operations as well, how much do you trust data?
So, there is an auditing team under me, so I tell them one thing: only God alone we trust, rest everybody has to bring data. So it's as simple as that. The data and use of data, it's not a choice. That's the only way to go ahead with it. If you don't have data, then it is just an opinion. It could vary from person to person. The only thing which makes it stand the test of time or give that stamp of truth, that is data. When you ask that question of is technology a double-edged sword, I actually wanted to say that it's like there is no good or bad tool. It's actually the person wielding the tool makes it good or bad. Technology is absolutely no different. This is just a tool in your hand, and how we use it, whether it is generative GPTs, or it is AI, ML, deepfake, or creating something which is, a simple, very human example I'll give you. There was some viral video of Narendra Modi dancing Garba. It's a deepfake video. Okay, now imagine a child which has like a very sad story, I can say. If somebody lost a mother when it was like say 2, 3, there is no memory developed in that child. But imagine you can create a deepfake video using all the data available on Facebook, LinkedIn of that mother. Create a video, make that video talk to that child. When the child is, let's say, 5 or 6, when it can absorb. Can you see the contrast between these two? It works on the same technology. But what is the end use? That alone determines whether it is good or bad. Okay. And do you have a choice not to go with this data technology? You are just lying to yourself if you say yes. It's not there.
And Ajay and Rahul, I'm posing this both to you. And because Ajay, you use data for taking very critical decisions, and same with Rahul, I'll come later, is that you are also trying to identify the real time, the pain points which are there. So Ajay, how are you using data and technology there?
So using data is absolutely, as Prasad said, is not a choice. And the thing is that there is an amount of data, it's a huge database which is available to you, and without able to absorb that and without able to kind of put it in a stacks and getting it usable, is something is not a manual process, so you need to have a technology to kind of bicep and kind of structure the data in such a way that it gives you some output, it gives you some results. Just to tell you a fact that 2 weeks back when we were with the SEBI chairperson, the whole audience in the financial services, including all the institutions and exchanges and regulators and all of, they were jabbed because the chairperson comes from a background where they are used to use a lot of data being a banker, and at SEBI where data usage was just not in practice, but these days they don't make any regulation, they don't issue any circular without having a backtesting data analysis. So she made a presentation wherein it was reflective that what are the data is saying in terms of SEBI's perception. Like SEBI used to perceive like a door stopper. You submit anything to regulator, it will take months. But you look at the data now, there is nothing pending more than 3 weeks. So it's like after analyzing the data, you take a course of action, how to improve the processes, how to kind of build a wow with the customer satisfaction, and you kind of build some of the customer responsive products. And that's possible only after analyzing the data. So just another good example, like a decade back when you open a bank account, you need to get a signature of another customer of the bank who knows you. Today you don't need to do anything, you don't need to even walk to the bank. You just need to log into an app wherein the camera clicks from your own phone, camera clicks your photograph, it takes your signature, it verifies you as you, it takes your Aadhaar card, PAN card from the DigiLockers, and your account is open and operational within a few seconds.
So has the decision-making cycle reduced at organization level as well?
Definitely. Say with the data utilizations, there is the identity of the people with whom you are dealing, the identity of the people with whom you have been trading, the customers' behavior are predictable. The thing is that you have a lot of history about all of those things with you, and with that data analysis, you know what is he going to like, what does he want, what is he going to do, and his past track record, performance, and everything is available with you at a click. And based on the customer's ability to absorb any particular product, you can probably make a recommendation. You have hundreds of products, especially in the financial services where we work. You have hundreds of products, and probably every product might not be useful for everyone. If somebody is more a risk taker, probably the products in and around the equity, which probably can give you higher returns, is the most suitable one. But the guy who's kind of in the capital protection mode and would not like to take risk, but capital preservation is the primary motto, you need to kind of offer some of those products which are AAA rated and highly safe, and there is zero probability. Probably the sovereign securities are the answer for them. And they give you about 7.5–8% kind of annual returns, but zero risk. So all of those data which you have, you can kind of build your processes around the data, you can kind of automate a lot of things. You prevent a fraud risk with the data analysis. You know the moment a customer, everyone's PAN card and Aadhaar card are linked. Now that's a compulsion. If anyone has done any kind of a problem or lafda with any of the regulator in the past, his PAN card is reflected. The moment you enter his client code, the PAN card will say you can't deal with this guy because SEBI has banned him. So all of those frauds can be, without any moment waste, can be stopped.
Surely. So that's again a risk mitigation which you're pointing about. And Rahul, I would like you to wear the CIO hat here, because you would then not be the consumer of data, but you would be the manufacturer, the manager of that data, those insights which people expect from you. So as a CIO, how did you go about this journey of constructing that kind of technology systems, that digital infra, which can provide the right insights at the right time?
That's a difficult question, Okay, I think the team, my colleagues really covered well on the expectation and how they're managing data. But for us, it's a quite difficult job because data is spread out all over the place. Secondly, it is very unstructured. Even to make sense from the data is quite difficult. The expectation of every person is also very, very different. And sometimes we create data but don't utilize it, and after some time feel that it is not required. So, how we went about it is, we try to define what is, hot, warm, cold for us, in terms of how can we classify our data, classification, the profiling of data, then, making it more structured and so that we can analyze. Because the challenge has been for, especially for CIOs, is everybody wants reports in a very different manner. And now, thanks to generative AI that's coming, if the data is proper and data is structured at one place, you can see what you want to see. You don't have to create reports for people to see that information. I think that's where we are trying to go. But one point I would like to make here is, I think nowadays, even management thinks before, saying no to data handling. And I think he was mentioning about cloud. The conversation is not, why cloud, what we can do more. Similarly, with data also now, okay, it may be useful for us in the coming future because data is what will fuel them, whatever they try to do in generative AI or even in business usage as well. As he mentioned, a lot of trust, Ajay mentioned, a lot of trust has come in the system in terms of you don't need, if you have this information, you don't need to go out and you talk about it. There's no guarantor, there's nothing, nobody, who is actually helping you open a bank account. Those things has come in. But to manage that, it's quite difficult job. Optimization is very, very difficult because, over a period of time, you collect data and you won't even realize when terabytes become petabytes. By the time you realize this is petabytes and the cost becomes huge, and then people start realizing, let's throw this, let's reuse this. So with us, what we have been doing, we have been, data governance is a key aspect of what we have been managing and how we have to move forward. And we are very careful when we are trying to have information, because in our case, in construction, drone data, one time drone flies, data is in GBs, if I do not structure it, if I do not keep it properly, in a year I am in petabytes without anything, doing anything. So how do I extract information, what I need from that data, and then move on? So that is what we are coming to, and that's what we are trying to focus on as CIOs, I would say.
Thanks. So, of course, there are challenges, like you rightly mentioned. There is, you can collect data, but how much to collect? What is the right data to collect? And Manish, when your organization goes to CIOs, not many are as enlightened as Rahul is. And how do you advise them on taking this digital transformation or on collecting data, integration of disparate systems, use case clustering? There are issues like too much data collected, how to manage all that data, and governance overall.
Yeah, it's audible, yeah. So I guess most of the audience here, I'm hoping, would have seen the recently concluded World Cup. And we use this term umpire's call in many of the refereeing decisions, or not refereeing decisions, but the umpiring decisions came up. The reason why I'm alluding to it is in the technology landscape, we use the term human in the loop. And I'm just alluding to the point made earlier about data trust. The point is similar to the cricket analogy here. Once we had the umpire's call situation, there is a lot of debate in that cricketing fraternity about how is it that the umpire's call is to be validated, because the ball's not actually there. And that's why the technology, while it's there in terms of the DRS, it allows the umpire to make that last final call in some of these 50-50 situations, as we call it. From a conversation that we are having today, whenever we have these conversations with large organizations, our customers today, what we kind of tell them is the ability to trust data only comes from a standpoint of the organization being able to look at it in the same manner. Traditionally, when we have had business intelligence systems, and honestly, in the Indian geo, organizations have done phenomenally well, even without technology being in place. So when customers come and tell us, well, technology is going to give us a 2x, 3x effect, there's no straight answer to it. But answering the point about data trust becomes paramount, because at that point in time, our first point of call or port of call to the customers is, if we were to democratize this information such that whatever guardrails you need in terms of accesses, that's fine. But let's have a common technology facade, common technology interface to be able to view this. Then it comes to the point about how we kind of do the plumbing in terms of pulling up the data to a right place, storing it, disseminating, etc. But I think for me, the most important point which comes up in many of these conversations is, while you'll have technology that can definitely be an enabler to your business, the processes and the people which underline this are actually the key ones, which we will only try and help you giving a common interface to that. That's really the first aspect which comes into play. Then there are obviously aspects in terms of governance which was talked about. There are aspects around data quality that we typically handle. From my standpoint, what I've seen in the last many years now across multiple organizations at the end of the day do demand a lot of technology. And we're seeing this even with the Gen AI things which are coming into play. Our pitch to customers, our positioning with customers is, we will be able to handle all of these things from a technology standpoint with provision of common set of tools, but underlying them with the processes that will remain. From a AWS standpoint, typically whenever we have approached modernization conversations, is always, we call this as a shared responsibility model. So there are things which we do off the cloud in terms of management from an infrastructure, data, storage, etc. But there will be aspects around processes which will be paramount to an organization's health from a data standpoint.
Do you think there is a big downside to not modernizing?
Sorry, come again?
Is there a big downside to not modernizing your systems here?
Not modernizing. Not really. I don't think there is any question mark in terms of organizations today looking at whether they should modernize. I think most of them, again, there are degrees of modernizations as we call about. Many of them today are looking at 3 years, 4 years back, as I said, our conversations was how do we take splinters of applications to cloud. Today, a lot of these are around application modernizations of core systems. I mean, banking conversations today are no longer about how do we kind of just modernize the core banking applications. A lot of our conversations are around actually hollowing the core. So with fintech, typically we have seen this explode in a very big way, that the traditional core banking applications are no longer actually something which they depend on. So banks, the traditional banks that we see today are also looking at how we can modernize without, the inhibitions, I would call them, as they had today maybe 2 years back. That's changing in a very big way.
Sure. And Arindam, one of the things again here is what just now Manish mentioned is that their orientation is changing organizations. He just mentioned, and I come from banking background, he said that they're hollowing the core, which is probably a sea change from what it was about a decade ago. But do you see organizations doing digital transformation for the sake of saving on costs, or moving to cloud technologies on saving on costs? Are they seeing this as as something that will equip them better, or it will help them save costs?
See, I think the first generation of the cloud adoption had different set of drivers, but clearly I completely agree with Manish that today the cloud gives you the power to experiment faster, to reduce the innovation cycle, to get an organization banded around being more agile. Cost is never a consideration in those piece at all. Technology complexities, as you rightly pointed out, once you put the process guardrails there, then there is a collaboration which happens between, so like for example from our company, we do a couple of practices like data consulting. And the point that Rahul made, that how clean is your data? There is a subsystems that are getting modernized, right? Typically you will see in the different industries. And then there are set of processes and the applications you are acquiring which are modern by itself. There are few applications which are going to be doing a batch process of the data. There are few applications which would be streaming the data. So there are different ways you need to store, you need to process, you need to analyze, and then the question of analytics and everything come in. I think the industry is trying to come together in defining the broad guardrails for the process part of it. Rest is 100% work in progress, and there are many things which are getting disrupted. It means today it is possible for you to look at the same customer from the way he has signed a document for you to generate an insurance policy, as opposed to understanding his sentiment when he is hanging up the call on the contact center. There are phrases what you say, and you can capture the sentiment, and that sentiment analytics gives you the propensity of buying. And the same guy who is writing a contract on your digital insurance paper, you can match those two things to kind of generate a proper proposition. These are only possible when you matchmake an upgradation of your existing subsystems and getting new subsystems in the framework of fundamentally that you need to look at data from a different governance guardrail.
In fact, you touch upon a very important aspect about issuance of policy, handling those issues, sentiment analysis, etc. And I think I should have mentioned this earlier as well. Yes, customer experience becomes very important, and I think some of the most resilient organizations have had a very good customer focus there as well. So it's heartening to see when you say say that they are focusing on cloud migration or transformation, not just for saving costs, but also getting that kind of competitive edge as well. And MVP, this is true from your ops side as well, because you handle a lot of therefore customer queries coming out of businesses who could be really tough, should I put it mildly, very tough when it comes to any kind of issues related to facilities management.
So I told there is no deviation from what Manish mentioned and what Arindam mentioned. It is there are two ways of approaching a situation. One, you go with a carte blanche approach. Whatever be the problem, is like I invented a hammer. Every problem I look at will be a nail. Or the other one is that you have data and analytics around it, and you exactly know, okay, this problem requires a hammer, the other one requires a spanner. Bringing the example or the situation a bit closer to home, that's my company's field of operation, like facility management. Let's assume that there are complaints generated, the tickets we call that, employees, they keep generating, I mean, any request. It could be coffee machine running out of coffee to, it's hot, it's cold. If you actually analyze those tickets, now there are trends emerging. For example, I can say that based on the operational analytics of facility management tickets, 40% of the tickets are around ventilation is hot or cold. So if I have to employ or deploy a technician, I will always make sure, okay, HVAC system is the place where this facility needs attention. Or we are capturing the occupancy of the place, including washrooms, how frequently it is used. And able to go back and tell the management, maximum occupancy of your office is on Tuesday and Wednesday, just by the footfall in the washroom. So if you have to hold an event where you want maximum attention, do it on Tuesday or Wednesday. You might think it is Monday, it is not. It's actually data telling, undisputed. And the analytics, these are very basic analytics, like the extreme other side is what he mentioned. You can sense emotions. There is an occupancy study based on ethnicity. I mean, everybody has got a affinity towards a certain group of people. It's there in office also. That leads to pockets of offices being occupied more than some other pockets of offices. And if you study that ethnography of your population, and believe me, it's like companies, firms, offices, they are like individuals. They have its own personalities. So if you study the ethnography of your office people, and if you're going to come up with another corporate office, it's a valuable data and analytics around it. You will decide, okay, how many meeting rooms I want, should the male washroom should be here, or male washroom should be close to cafeteria or the smoking zone. It depends on the study. It's not, I mean, earlier, like Rahul will agree totally that earlier it is on the general, whatever the architect felt like. Now people actually go in. It's like a bespoke solution to the problem of the customer. So that's the power of data and the analytics around it.
And this is a question generally to anyone in the audience, because it's a question which has been always been itching in my mind, is data and technology considered to be an requirement for automation? And the main question is that, is automation considered to be a magic pill for all problems? Is this what you find when you interact with within your organization or outside? That automation typically will solve everything?
Automation, one straight answer, automation will not solve everything. Okay. The second one is that it definitely an enabler. Now what to automate is two things. Repeated menial task, automate. High risk task, automate. If you want to reduce concentration of head count, in some places, automate. Wherever you need human touch, empathy, sympathy, understanding your people, please put a human being out there. I'm sure IVR would have been a great innovation when it came. But I'm sure every one of our hated to the bones now. If you call a place for assistance, you really pray that it's a human being who is picking up and not an IVR. So that is the swing of automation I can tell.
So MVP, you mentioned about the workforce. You touched upon the human aspect of it. And Rahul, my question would be to you, and I think it's almost the final question now, but when we talk about the workforce aspect of it, how have you seen data and technology improving the productivity in your organization?
That's not only in our organization, I would say, because we have a very large construction workforce at site. And the construction productivity itself is very low, not only in India, across the world. I think that's one area which all of us are trying to increase productivity, because we have to deliver projects really fast. So I think the kind of insights we are getting from data, and I think, one thing which we have done, which we are not only trying, when we're trying to deploy data or technology for use, we're not, everything can't be an ROI. It could be cost avoidance, a very big parlance to us. But if a project gets delayed, I may not understand the value today, may not be able to share that value, but it gets delayed, I can avoid a lot of cost. If I can be more productive, can I do that task much faster? So generally, when we try and automate some of these things, we always look at what we can eliminate, what we can simplify, what we can standardize before we can automate. And that is helping us to increase our productivity. In fact, nowadays, earlier the pressure was from the top management that let's get the productivity up. Even when I go to project sites, we have people coming to me and saying, I don't want to fill hard copy form. I want a mobile app in my hand, where I should know how much material is lying, what I took yesterday, what did not happen yesterday. And this is from the people who are actually working by hand at site. So I think from the demand, the productivity is a little bit coming up to a certain extent. We really want a quantum change there. That's what we are trying to work on. But this is heavily dependent on how we can use data and construction tech together. So that's how we are handling it.
That's great. So in this discussion in the past, about an hour, so while we started with understanding how resilience and geopolitics in fact go hand in hand, and how data, real-time data coming from various geographies is helping us, we've also seen how companies are taking digital transformation in the right way, not just for cost cutting, but for improving their customer experience, improving their productivity on the employee front. And I think resilience, building resilience is not just one aspect of productivity, or in fact getting real-time decisions, or just making people more aware of what is happening. I think it's also the little bits, what we have learned today, it's also the little bits which you implement in every aspect of your business function, wherein you use technology to its right manner. And we have experts here who guide clients also to identify those right uses where it will make the biggest impact. Perhaps it's good for organizations to start with one use case at a time, see the visible changes, and I think all value creators over a period of time have done those little things in the best and the most efficient way possible, which has given them that kind of strength. So on that note, I would really give a heartfelt thanks to all the panelists for sharing such insightful views on using data and technology to build business resilience. Thank you, audience, for listening to us. I hope it was insightful for you as well.